Everyone, and welcome to another episode of 6 Degrees of Associations. We've gone through quite a few people. I think we've done like 8 or 9 of these episodes, right, Lucas?
Yeah.
Pretty excited for our guest today, though, because we've talked about digital marketing, we've talked about pivoting, we've talked about event strategies, and today is something that falls really close to my heart and is a little bit connected to what we do here every week on 6 Degrees of Associations, which is storytelling. So I'd love to welcome Stuart Meyer to the show. He is the founder and chief storyteller of Social Frequency Media, as well as a co-founder and partner with .org Freelancer. Stuart, welcome today.
Thank you so much. It's so great to be here. So great to connect with you, Aaron, and Lucas again.
Absolutely. And of course, hello, Lucas. Good to see you again this week.
Thank you, Aaron. I'm really looking forward to this one. Storytelling just seems to be popping up left and right as a concept, as an idea, as something that's going to add value for our industry. So it's great to have somebody on here like Stuart who lives and breathes it and can really tell us more about how we use this and where its relevance comes in. So.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, let's dive in because Stuart, something unusual about your history is that your breadth and depth of positions within associations. So you've lived, breathed this world from the inside, as well as being a service provider on the outside. Tell us a little bit about your career, and which helps us launch into what you're doing now.
Definitely. Well, the interesting thing, Aaron, is I spent the first portion of my career working in politics of all places. I was one of those people that just wanted to make a difference in the world, and I made a pretty quick exit from politics after having worked in a governor's administration for almost 2 years. I went to law school for a little while and realized that the world had enough lawyers, and I found the association world, which was really incredible because associations make a difference in the world each and every day at all levels. And like many, I arrived to this point working through many of the traditional roles for over a decade in associations, from membership and marketing to a direct, sort of a mid-level director level position to an executive chief marketing membership officer position with the Emergency Nurses Association. I began at the American Bar Association, and I've also served as CEO of a national organization called the National Barbecue Association, which I served in that role for 3 years. But I think the interesting thing is I'm also a composer, filmmaker, a web series producer, and a digital content artist. And when it comes down to it, art is perhaps the most engaging and compelling form of human communication, engagement, and storytelling. Making connections with others through inspiring expressions is something that comes really naturally to me. I've been composing since I was age 11. So when I look at my own association journey, it really comes down to 3 big questions that have really guided me in the direction that I've gone as a storyteller and as an organization storification strategist, as I like to say, in addition to one of my favorite things is also developing, producing podcasts. And I arrived at all those points from everything that I learned in the first 2 decades of my time within associations. So, the big questions are, how do we become an association everyone races toward and wants to be a part of? Another big question is, how do we transform our association from a sterile entity into a thriving organic culture? And then finally, what separates non-members from passive members and passive members from loyal lifelong members? And this is something from my very first day stepping into associations. And even before this, I was very interested in voter behavior in politics. Why do people vote? Why do they not vote? So it's funny, this funny continuation into associations is, why are some people members? Why are they not members? Why are some members passive? Why are they active? So over the past 2 decades, in addition to the roles that I play within associations, I was also very involved in ASAE on the decision to join studies and the decision to volunteer studies. I worked or volunteered for their Speakers Bureau, where we disseminated all of the data. At that time, I was at the Emergency Nurses Association. We were part of that. So those 2 studies, along with my role as a membership section council chair, I was in the membership section council for 5 years, really shined a bright light into kind of these behavioral models for what really drives and motivates members. Building upon that, I've done lots of in-depth focus groups, especially around conferences and conventions for quite a few associations. And you're really focusing on how to expand the loyalty of membership, how to transition from being an entity to a culture, And how do we capture in the bottle that which we know happens on the ground at conventions and conferences? And the bottom line really is it's a shift from, associations as information disseminators, which is largely what associations have done for a long time, to being storytellers. Because storytelling is really the ultimate differentiator, because neuroscience shows that our brains are hardwired for story because they're simulated personal experience. It's a chance to walk in other people's shoes, to compare and contrast our lives.
Right.
And to form a bond with the story's characters as if the characters become us. Associations are ongoing stories from the beginning to the middle and into the future.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting because, of course, in the world of marketing, a lot of people really gravitate towards what business to consumer marketing is doing right now. And therefore, a lot of people start putting themselves in that same camp. And to be honest, you would think podcasting is a place where a consumer brand might really play. And as Lucas and I were talking the other day, even though there is B2B business, you're always still selling to an individual. And I think storytelling, moving into specific your specialty of podcasting or your preferred platform of storytelling, is a really interesting space for associations to get comfortable with and to see that as something that they would actually experiment with. So can you maybe help us see through an example that you've worked with, how have you helped an association client specifically maybe move towards that platform and to wrap their arms around that form of engagement?
Absolutely. And just before I jump into that, it's if we could put in a bottle the strong connections that are made at conferences and conventions, understanding why that I know firsthand from all of these focus groups, all this research, people arrive not knowing anyone, they're struggling in some cases, they start to meet people, social events, soon they're sharing their stories, other people are sharing stories with them, they're realizing they're not alone, they're realizing that I can learn so much from others and I can give so much to others, and then suddenly I have all these new friendships. And then it evolves to a point where just the nature of meeting becomes stories that we share over the years of when we first met and this and that. And then suddenly these associations become places where people couldn't envision themselves with that welcome door being closed and them not being connected to that. To me, in all of the different realms of communication and marketing, membership, anything that we can do to really pull passive members deeper into the association. And I've done a lot of documentary video work, things like that in storytelling. But to me, podcasts is in a very special category. And, kind of the case study, I've worked with the American or the Academy of Medical Surgical Nurses for the past 2 years. As a matter of fact, tomorrow night, we will record our second anniversary special for our podcast. That'll be episode number 52. And ultimately, the biggest thing is that podcasts are the ultimate storytelling medium. They're efficient. There's a low barrier to participation. Everyone carries a podcast device with them that is going to tell you when there's a new episode, which is the really cool aspect to it. You can do other things and listen to a podcast, which is really exciting. And it becomes part of our commutes. It becomes part of our out walking. It becomes part of doing other things. Really, I think the story wouldn't be complete without the statistics that are out there that we know. The most recent ones from 2020 is 75% of Americans are now familiar with podcasts. That translates to 212 million people, which is an increase of 10 million in just the past year. 55% of Americans have listened to a podcast. And I think the most significant one is specifically half of Americans aged 12 to 34 listen to podcasts monthly. And we're always talking about, yes, we have the more, senior career stage folks, but we gotta bring in the millennials. Now we got the Gen Zers that are starting to come into the fold, and they're hardwired for podcasts and understanding that. It's differentiated from education from the standpoint it's a relaxing sort of entertaining thing. Our model is we have 4 co-hosts, and these 4 we had an audition process. We put out a call for co-hosts, and we did put them through kind of a rigorous audition, which they weren't too happy with, but we wanted to see how well they thought on their feet just out of the gate. And then they represent all age groups. They're from all over the country. It's a diverse group, also in terms of both in terms of ethnicity, but also in terms of career stage. Okay. We have 2 bedside nurses, and then we have a couple of educators. and sort of combine that all together. And it's interesting how it's evolved. We have ranked in the top 100 medical podcasts in and out over the past 2 years with all the episodes that we've done. And part of it is finding a good format, and we focus on storytelling. Everyone we bring on board, even if we bring someone who's there to talk about data or evidence-based practice, we want them to tell a personal story about an example to illustrate that, something that we can all relate to. And then basically the way that we've evolved, last year we decided to evolve more towards a panel format where the co-hosts simply just talk. We throw a topic at them, we call it like kind of the View format.
Yeah.
We throw a topic at them, and they just have a conversation about it. And what I love about it, and we always have a disclaimer that the thoughts and views expressed in this podcast don't necessarily reflect the Academy of Medical Surgical Nurses, because I know associations are concerned about that. But it creates a sort of frontline honesty, and over time. And these co-hosts, they don't want to leave anytime soon. They want to. We always give them an out because they are volunteers, but they've become these known personalities within the academy. So at convention, we have them out on the exhibit hall floor. We have live from the convention episodes that we've done. We've done some video documentary work with them so that people can actually see them and learn more about them, because ultimately our audience has formed a bond with each of these co-hosts as if they are a colleague, not someone that's way up here, but a colleague, someone that they've gotten to know, someone like their coworkers, which I think is very powerful, because then they've made a connection. They've bonded with 4 active members of the association, and of course we do intertwine certification, and we do talk about the convention, and they share their firsthand experience. Oftentimes they share it without even being asked to talk about it, because it's something that's very meaningful to them. And we've had a couple that were very active already, and then we had a younger nurse that is just like going like gangbusters now. She's involved in the legislative advocacy program, and before then she was just kind of dipping her toe into the water in terms of both her career and getting involved. So it's amazing to see the transformation. We always make time in each episode for them to give an update on what's going on in their lives. One of them's going after her DNP. One just got certified. During COVID, we did weekly episodes. We called it our COVID huddle episodes, just to continue to communicate. So it's really created something that's powerful, especially before the pandemic. Once we've arrived in the pandemic, digital content has become everything. Right. And the lesson to take from it is the pandemic has only made podcasts more relevant in terms of how we're communicating with our members. And the great thing is, ultimately, to me, that's the medium I have jumped into, because I think that is the one that can make the difference in terms of these relationships that we have with members, and begin to humanize our associations in our connection, our regular connection that we have with members. And we've started bringing sponsors in to help underwrite what I think are the fairly modest costs of ultimately keeping these productions going. So that's something.
Because I think you have like a very unique perspective coming through as podcasters. Most of these people are creative folks and marketing people who are running podcasts and things for association, but you've actually been in the executive suite, leadership roles of associations. How do you think that makes you better as a podcaster?
I think it's mainly because I see the importance of cutting as much distance between 2 points as possible into a personalized connection. When I was CEO of the National Barbecue Association, one of the things is we created 12 special interest groups. I mean, a lot of folks have special interest groups. But what we did at that point is we had monthly conference calls that we just recorded and made available on demand. So anyone could show up and, you were talking about Clubhouse a little bit ago, but the idea was you could sit there and eavesdrop. You can ask questions, you can get answers. So, to me as an executive, I know that I can get someone for life if they can make a relationship, if they can make a connection with the organization. I think the important thing is science and human psychology and behavior shows us that happiness is rooted in 3 things. It's our sense of the strength of our social connections. It's our sense of identity and our sense of belonging. And you better believe that association members on some level are happiness seekers. I mean, we're all happiness seekers. The decisions we make we think we'll be more happy for having made the decision than we were before. So when you think about, making that podcast makes a connection, it's something that these members can identify with, because it's not just the PhD educators.
Mm-hmm.
It's the floor nurses that are talking and sharing their hopes and their fears and being very candid about their struggles, which is an amazing thing, because now suddenly, you know what, someone else, look, they're struggling, I'm struggling, we all struggle. This is something very powerful about that. And then ultimately creating that cohesive sense of belonging through that connection. And suddenly the podcast becomes that doorway that if it didn't exist, those people wouldn't walk through it, in terms of the connection to the organization. Because like I say, I think associations, the challenge is we've not done enough to tell our stories. We've not done enough to humanize ourselves. And we've largely become the disseminators of information. And sometimes in a faceless way. We see a big logo. We know what the logo is. But those human stories and the storification, as I call it, of the organization, it makes its way all the way into the boardroom. Because what is a strategic plan? That's a story we're planning to tell. In order to achieve, and you ask yourself, what is a story? It begins with a protagonist, and it's a character like us just going along enjoying their lives until an unexpected event changes everything. And that sets our character on a journey toward a meaningful goal where we face struggle, we face adversity, we make allies, and we encounter adversaries along the way. And then at a certain point, there's a turning point or a series of turning points that brings us closer to either actually attaining our goal or getting us closer to our goal, which sort of breeds this moment of wisdom, knowledge, insight, and kind of the overall moral to the story. And as human beings, our curiosity, we're very compelled towards those kind of stories. So telling your strategic plan and storifying your strategic plan is important. And keep telling the installments of those stories, because then that's how that's how sort of we psychologically make sense of the world around us. The reason people love bad news is because it is that unexpected event that we're looking to see how it's going to play out. And those are all hooks. We all talk about getting our hooks into our members and getting them more deeply involved to reel them in. So, to me, it's.
I was just going to say, when you're talking about hooks, I think the other thing is, we talk a lot from the association perspective, how do you continue to engage the members? It is also a way in which to use the platform for your members to speak to other members, of course, because to your point, in the past, it's put a logo here, maybe put out a white paper here. But, thinking about associations and how they might use a storytelling platform is not just so much also always talking about your association's desires and needs and wants and stories, but it gives you this hugely broad platform now where your inventory, if you will, is endless, depending on how often you want to put out stories. So if you have
absolutely
members, you've got 1,000 shows or 500 shows with 2 members each. I mean, things like that, where I think this is where our association audience might not have immediately adopted this type of platform, because they think, oh, okay, but how does that really relate to us getting the message out? But in a time when everyone's trying to strategically think, how do you get your members to feel that the association is working for them? There's no better and easier way to do it, and least salesy way, if I would also argue, is
because it's authentic, it's genuine. Authentic. Everything that we're doing is authentic and genuine. And outside of podcasts, I've done so many documentary video projects, especially for like conventions. One of my specialties for years has been videos that we show at the start of each general session. And for the American Academy of Medical Surgical Nurses 2 years ago, when we could still go to conventions, there was a series that I shot of everyday nurses telling their stories.
Right.
And even on site, I just pulled people aside and edited on site into a closing session that people were literally laughing. They were crying in the audience. And that's a real authentic human connection. Because they see themselves in that. And then suddenly they feel emboldened because they're part of something. They know that other people struggle too, that we're just human and we're trying to do the best that we can. And
I like those videos not only as somebody who attends and gets to look back at an event and relive the emotions and, oh, I know that person, I met that person at the show, but also it's a great opportunity to show what's happening at the convention if you couldn't make it, and it pulls people in for the next one and the next one and the next one. So
Absolutely. One project I did, because everyone's talking about, making that jump to first time attendee is a big jump, especially if you don't have a group that's going to come along with you. But I did a documentary following along a first time attendee throughout. Like, I've actually done this a couple of times for organizations, and it's amazing to see the honest transformation from the first interview to following them through the halls and through events to the end, and seeing that to me, it's, if you can't be there, I'm always trying to create, this is the next best thing, and hopefully it's going to get people off the fence.
All right, we're going to post one of those videos.
Yeah. We are. Well, we try to keep these under 15 minutes. So I'm always the one that comes in with the hook to try to start, close this out here. So I'm coming in with the hook questions, Stuart. This was so fascinating. Of course, we want to leave a little left for people to imagine and to reach out to you and speak to you. So we'll make sure we post up all of your links. But, as this is 6 Degrees of Association, we found you through .org source and .org freelancer that you also are a founder of. So that's how we've got connected to you. Who would you argue that we should speak to next that our audience would love to hear from and really benefit from knowing?
Well, I know that I think I'm going to break with tradition because I have so many people I can think of. But one for me would be definitely Terry Hinckley, who is CEO of the Academy of Medical Surgical Nurses. She is a relatively new CEO. She came in about the time I started working with them, and I've worked for hundreds of associations over the years, especially in 11 years since I've been running Social Frequency, and she is such an innovative thinker, looking to try new approaches, new ways to do things. I think it would be a great CEO to talk to, because having been a CEO, a lot of times we fall into the, I'm an administrator, and I try to not step on the board's toes. But she's actually a med surg nurse as well, so that helps a lot. But she's really sharp. Greg Fine and Sherry Jacobs.
Okay.
Who was on the association side, now with Avenue M Marketing. She's written a couple of books for ASAE, which is really good. And so
awesome. I love it.
Well, breaking traditions,
and can I put another plug in? Because one of the things we were talking about before we started, Lucas, you were talking about how are we now innovating and taking podcasts to the next level. And without going too deeply into it, I would just invite you to listen to a podcast that I co-created and produced with Olympic gold medalist Julie Mancuso, who's a retired alpine skier, but she's seven-time world champion, 1 gold, 2 silvers, a bronze. She retired a couple years ago, and this is kind of her telling her story. But our approach to that podcast, because I've had, being a co-creator, we were able to do everything that I'd wanted to do in podcasts. But we do audio documentaries. Where I just literally mic her up. She goes throughout her daily life. She sends me 2 hours of footage, and I craft it into a 10-minute story. And then also the way that we tell stories, like films have underscore music, and this is the musician artist in me. But when there's a particular poignant part of a story that one of our guests, which range from her fans to other Olympic gold medalists like Tora Bright, Jamie Anderson, and others, is I kind of weave in music to that sort of carries it forward, and then working on the pacing of that story, kind of like NPR does sometimes. I'm a huge NPR junkie, so that's probably part of where it comes from. But almost in a cinematic way, telling these stories that really draws you deeper and deeper and deeper into what's happening. And I think those are next level podcast strategies, and it's something I personally love to do. Because we're taking a story and crafting it into an even more powerful story.
Good. Well, I will be sure to touch base with you so we can make sure we even get some of those pointers into the blog following the posting of this video. But Stuart, we could talk to you for hours. We really could. It's so fascinating. And not just because you're a strong storyteller, but the storytelling is so interesting. And both of us, we're here today, doing a video / podcast recording of this very topic. So we love it. We can't wait for more of our audience to, really try to embrace this particular platform and storytelling in general. This is really a way in which any business association can work to engage their members and audiences. So thank you so much for sharing.
Absolutely. My pleasure. And you all are amazing. I've really enjoyed getting to know you. And I'll tell you what, I would offer to host one of these so that I can put you all in the guest seat, because I think you all have some pretty incredible stories to tell that I now know about. So why don't we plan? We should plan to do that down the road.
Absolutely.
6 degrees swap.
Yeah.
That's right.
Host swap. I like it. I think
Flip
that'll
it and reverse it.
a whole new podcast series. I love it. Well, thank you, Stuart. Your energy is palpable. So we appreciate you being here. And thank you, Lucas. Good to see you again. And folks, we'll see you back in 2 weeks with another episode of 6 Degrees of Associations.